have a special name? Turn up notifications. Here. I'm the best. I'm with you guys. What could be better? What's up, everyone? Thanks for hanging out here with us. We have got an hour in front of us, pretty close to it anyway. Eric Lindquist, I'm Adam Kaufman, teamed up as we always are on Fridays. At least I feel like we always are, but that's the case during football. And this, unfortunately, is the last time we get to talk about football here on a Friday of this busy NFL season. This is the Yahoo NFL Super Bowl show. Big game right around the corner, a couple days away. What, I don't know, 50 some odd hours. How are you, man? How you feeling about it?
Doing well. Yeah, I've progressively got more excited. I think Wednesday, I just kind of realized that I hate Super Bowls because my Vikings are never in them. So my entire life has been a sham as a football fan. But I think this game has a lot of great narratives around it. I love betting. I love sports. So this should be a lot of fun for everybody involved. It's when all of the normies, everybody who doesn't necessarily care about sports, they have to for a day. We kind of force them into it. So should be some extra money to be had in the DFS streets.
I don't know who a good comp would be for Minnesota. You could speak to it better than me, but who's like I don't think it'd be Dalvin Cook necessarily, but who would be the Matt Stafford in, with another team in the Super Bowl, to which, your Vikings would be going out and making Minnesota like the Detroit Rams t-shirts that are being sold in Detroit right now, which are just a complete and total utter embarrassment, and speaks to what life must be like as a Lions fan in 2022 when you have Detroit Rams t-shirts made up just so you can celebrate your old quarterback playing in a Super Bowl in his first year with somebody else. Is there somebody for you from Minnesota?
Yeah. It's going to be a deep cut, but Brad Johnson is the guy. Brad Johnson left the Minnesota Vikings for 1 year. You know what happened in that 1 year? He was the quarterback of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and won a freaking Super Bowl. So I know that's a deep cut for some people, but thanks so much, Brad Johnson.
03 or something?
It was right around that time frame. It was near, I don't know, 8th grade, freshman year of high school. All I know is that they were dark times because, it was one of those things where he left and you just kind of saw it happening. Obviously, Gruden, we don't talk about him, but we talk about Brad Johnson, and that guy, I liked him a lot. I thought he was a decent enough quarterback. He wasn't anything special, but pretty special to leave for literally 1 year, win a Super Bowl, and then come back to the Vikings.
Yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, the Patriots won in the 01, 03, 04 season, so it must have been 02, so the winter of 03. That it
was a cold winter there in Minnesota, let me tell you. Just shoot me.
We got a lot of. I didn't mean to start this on such a somber note. We're going to talk about.
Just make it hurt. It's fine. Yeah. I'm a Patriots fan. Life is so hard now. Leave me alone.
I should have at least worn a Pat's hat to get in the spirit of our final football show of the season, at least for the two of us. You're probably talking some more football before the big game rolls around on Sunday. We'll get to the Rams and the Bengals in just a moment. Want to tell you, and hopefully we can cover my mug up so you don't have to look at me reading all this. But of course, we've partnered with our good friends at Yahoo Fantasy throughout this NFL season to bring you some great offers, as we always do. You can check out our exclusive limited time offer. Gets you one free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. To qualify, you need to be new to Yahoo. That's the big thing. Sign up for an account via the link below. Deposit and play. It is just that simple, folks. Yahoo will then send us your name after you play in your first paid contest. We will reach out via email with your coupon. If you'd like to speed up that process, get yourself some access, that's okay. Email support@awesemo.com. We'll get you all set up. You can also claim a free $10 of site credit by clicking the link in the video description below. And that can be used to enter any Yahoo contest, including, of course, the $1 million baller for the Super Bowl. We'll also have a free roll running for the big game on Yahoo, with first place getting $1,000 plus a year of Awesemo Plus Platinum. You can find that link to that contest in the video description below. Make sure you use our DFS tools and projections designed specifically for Yahoo to give yourself the best shot at winning big. And thanks to our guy Mike, Awesemo himself, for making sure that you didn't have to look at me while I was telling you all of that great information. That's the important thing. That's what we like to celebrate around here. So
the horror of it. Yeah.
All right, but we're, like I said, excuse me, we've got the better part of an hour, obviously, here with the people, and then a whole lot more great Awesemo content coming your way on the YouTube and Twitter channels the rest of the day. But while we have our time, normally, obviously in the regular season into the playoffs, it's multiple games, it's multiple teams. We still have multiple teams, but normally it'll be a full slate of stuff that we're talking about. In this case, it's super focused. Just the one single game contest coming your way Sunday evening. And there are only so many different ways to go about setting a lineup. We will go obviously position by position. We'll talk to you about the Yahoo pricing, tell you who's been performing well, who hasn't, what you need to consider, all the great things that you need to obviously keep in mind. Get your questions in here for us, and we'll do our best to help you answer them and get those lineups built. But first and foremost, when it is just the one game, and it's a game of this magnitude, this importance, what kind of story are you telling yourself? How in love, I guess, are you falling in love with projections versus the narratives that you tell yourself about how you feel a game is going to play out?
I mean, what a deep question to start off the show with. I mean, what's the meaning of life there?
It's not all about numbers all the time. Sometimes it's,
okay.
You're not necessarily going to stack the
when
hell
I was a wee
out of the
lad.
Rams.
When I was a wee lad growing up in South Dakota, I had dreams, and those dreams
were to be able to
analyze individual football games to the best of my ability. And here's what I do. I basically look at the trenches first. I think that that's something that I think is going to be a narrative that we have here. The Cincinnati offensive line versus the Rams defensive line. We have PFF's first graded defense in the Los Angeles Rams. We have PFF's 20th graded defense here in Cincinnati. We have an overall ranking of second for the Rams, seventh for the Bengals. I will say, though, this Cinderella story that is the Bengals, they've been 13-7 against the spread, as opposed to 10-10 for the Rams. So in terms of value, that has changed from 4.5, which I hadn't moved off of all week, to now it's sitting at 4, which tells me that something's happening in terms of sharp money coming in on that 4.5, making it a little bit of a dip. I'm not really sure what to make of that here, but what I do know is that the Cincinnati Bengals have been an undervalued team throughout this entire season. And I don't think that's going to stop now. I think most people who are watching at home, who are taking this in, I know Laffy is in this camp as well, doing shows with him this week, where the Rams are going to be running people over with a train. Now, I think that defensive line is scary as all can be. How could it not be? You have Von Miller rushing, pass rush as well, adding alongside Aaron Donald. It's a ridiculous football team you're looking at there, but Cincinnati's been able to, just because of their ability to have dynamic playmakers, massive big playability from the likes of Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, who I always love, Tyler Boyd kind of getting mixed in as well. I think that there's still going to be ways that this game shoots out. So in terms of I think variance needs to always be discussed in a Super Bowl, because I think when you have a 35, 40-minute halftime intermission in the middle of a game, that's not something players are used to. You have so many wonky things as far as how much press you're doing leading up to this, knowing how many eyeballs are there. The variance of the game is so much more extreme. There are games that we've had, like the Patriots 2019, a 13-3 football game. Who saw that happening? Not me. Like, I'm just saying, you're going to get weird things in Super Bowls. That's where we kind of just need to be able to build lineups and take the path of being embracing some of that variance, building lineups other people that are clicking on random things are just not going to land on, and being able to willing to say that, all right, this is just like any other showdown we've played all year long.
You mentioned that Rams Patriots Super Bowl 3 years ago, which of course was the last time that Sean McVay and the Rams were in the Super Bowl. And, you know, that game, to your point, I mean, if you like defense, that was the game for you, obviously. Just the 16 total points. As I recall, I'd have to look it up, but as I recall, the over-under for that game going in was it was like mid-50s. You know, these were two incredibly, just ridiculously potent offenses, neither of which largely showed up in that big game. We're expecting a fair amount of offense, not to that degree, but the over-under sitting around 48.5 right now. I think at last look between these two teams, we know obviously how explosive both have the potential of being more regularly. The Rams are over the course of this season, what the Bengals have been able to do here in the playoffs. Are you expecting a lot of offense in this one?
I am. I'm expecting, I mean, I like the over. It's not something that is crazy that I want to be. A scale of 1 to 10, we'll go in like the 4 in the confidence range, but I definitely feel like both offenses, if you put Cincinnati in a come from behind mode, especially, I mean, the Rams are going to throw the ball no matter what. Their path of least resistance is just feed Cooper Kupp, get Odell Beckham and Van Jefferson mixed in, and move on with your day. They have this 3-headed backfield. We'll get to some of the discussions there because I have a lot of the same way that I felt about Cam Akers last week. That ended up coming to fruition. Whether it was just because he got dinged up or not, that's really the question. But coming off of 2 fumbles, I don't really see them wanting to just run the ball down Cincinnati's throat in the event that they're up in this game. I still think that they're going to air it out. So if you get Cincinnati in come from behind mode, which again, I'm not going to be betting the spread of this game. I thought 4.5 and 4. I mean, those are just outrageously fair numbers for a team that has shown come from behind ability against Kansas City, being great front runners, going up against the Raiders. So many ways that the Bengals can be effective, I think, offensively. Now, defensively is going to be the huge question mark for me. They're 20th in PFF's graded defense on the season. I mean, they are back half of the league, and they've played a little bit over their heads here the last few weeks. Now, 2 weeks coming in, once again, not something that you're used to having, increases the variance maybe a little bit. Maybe the Rams aren't as sharp offensively, but I like the over in this game. I do expect points here, but not to some degree where I want to go nuts betting it.
All right, let's get to all the different players factoring into this thing as it relates to lineup building. And of course, we begin with the quarterbacks. Let's start specifically with the pride of Detroit, Matt Stafford. He comes in, he is the highest projected score among the 2 QBs, sitting on Yahoo at about 20.2 points is where we have him in our Awesemo projections. He's $30, so he is the cheaper of the 2. He's certainly, we know what he's capable of. You know, you look at what he did against Tampa Bay and in San Francisco here in the playoffs so far, north of 700 yards between those 2 games, 5 touchdowns as well. Before we even get to Burrow, what are your expectations for Stafford against this defense?
My expectations is he's going to be effective. I think that's kind of where I'm pretty sold. And I know people are talking about Burrow on the other side with the pass rush here on the Rams. I literally brought that up on the onset, but I don't think anybody should have a doubt that Matthew Stafford, based off of what we've seen in the playoffs, and if you just write off a couple games, he had some turnover issues towards the end of the season, but Odell Beckham was getting acclimated to the offense. You had offensive linemen dinged up. You had a lot of COVID situations throughout the middle of the season as we got into the winter months where guys, you were just so shorthanded in so many departments. You had a decrepit secondary and he was coming from behind in a lot of these games. Now, I think with everybody healthy, with all hands on deck here, it looks pretty solid for Matthew Stafford to be effective here. And our top our top plays showdown for the showdown tool, NFL DFS top showdown tool. There you go. That was a mouthful. Couldn't get it out there. 71.3% of the time, Matthew Stafford is going to show up 2 to 5%, or second or fifth in Yahoo's projections there. That is the highest on the board, period, out of anybody. That includes Joe Burrow, Cooper Kupp. he's an unavoidable piece of chalk for me. I think that if you're going to play Cooper Kupp, a lot of those lineups are going to have $30 Matthew Stafford, especially because he's $3 less than Joe Burrow. I find that to kind of be a fascinating caveat that they've kind of changed over on Yahoo. I think it makes it really fun to build over there, a new puzzle to kind of put together. But considering he's the fifth priced player on this slate, and we know quarterbacks on a half-point PPR site are just higher valued on Yahoo, impossible for me not to be invested in him to an unbelievable amount on Yahoo.
Joe Burrow, who, as I mentioned, is priced just a little bit higher than Stafford and a pretty comparable amount of points projected. He's sitting at 18.9 in our projections. He's $33 versus 30 for Stafford. And I just think that, you look back at some of his numbers, what he's been doing, 21 plus points on Yahoo 8 times this year. Obviously, he's got a high ceiling, 340 passing yards at a minimum, 4 out of his last 7 games. That includes a couple of games where he went for 446 and 525. Some outrageous numbers, and obviously a really good cast of wideouts around him, Jamar Chase in particular, but you mentioned Higgins and Boyd, and we know what they can do as well. I guess it, I mentioned earlier, sort of comes down to like telling yourself a story. How do you think the game is going to play out? If you think that, let's say, the Rams are going to get off to a quick start, the Bengals are going to be playing from behind, makes a guy like Joe Mixon, we'll get to running backs in a little bit, a lesser play. And Joe Burrow is, if you're under the assumption that he's going to be throwing a ton, obviously a much better play in this one. I know LA's got that very excellent pass rush, as you alluded to. Burrow's been sacked, a dozen times here in the playoffs already. So it's not like he's received the best protection. People have been talking about that going all the way back to the draft at this point. But I can't help but wonder how ideal a pivot he is, whether in the superstar spot in general, off of Stafford, if you're picking just one of the 2 QBs to roster, even if you're putting them in a flex spot. Burrow is just there are so many different options to where he could go off. He becomes a very tough guy to fade.
Impossible to fade, I think. We're talking about 2 quarterbacks that are playing very, very high level of football. 34 touchdowns, 14 picks on the season here. We've seen him really come to life in a lot of these clutch scenarios here. Kansas City wasn't even that efficient, 23 for 38, but that second half, he made the plays that you need to have on the road in Arrowhead. And I think the underrated part of talking about this game, and the reason that I really like the over, is the weather. We are looking at a lot of playoff football that was played in some tumultuous conditions. And I'm not just talking about Arrowhead, being a little bit colder than normal, or definitely not Lambeau Field, where, you had Green Bay and San Francisco playing some really frigid football. But Cincinnati literally was playing at home against the Raiders, wasn't exactly the best conditions. And then they go into Arrowhead, definitely one of the more difficult places to play in the entire NFL. You get to play football in a bubble. You're playing football in a bubble here in LA. It's going to be like 80 degrees. It's absolutely perfect. There's no wind. You're playing in SoFi, where, it'll be actually more neutral than it would be for a normal home game for the Rams. And, the Rams obviously have had a lot of fans that have invaded that stadium over the last couple of weeks, even in the playoffs here. The 49ers obviously probably took over that stadium, but I feel like that's not talked about enough here. And if you put a team that loves to basically be track and pads in Cincinnati out on the field, Joe Burrow could really put up a massive game. I think he's a guy to probably be overinvested in putting him into the flex spot. I think both quarterbacks really make sense as flexes for me, especially with Cooper Kupp in this game. It's going to be hard for me to really shy away from him in the top scorer spot on a site like FanDuel or Yahoo. DraftKings, different situation. PPR, I'm going to be really invested in a Cooper Kupp there. But Joe Burrow, I think if you're going to play 2 pass catchers with him, no doubt he's still going to make a great top score, top play, somebody that could, no doubt about it, go for 303 touchdowns, and it would not surprise me.
Well, like you said, depends on the platform, obviously, that you're playing, to where, you really have to decide, who am I fading, and how do I think this game is going to play out? What's the best roster construction? But obviously we're fixated here on Yahoo. Given the Yahoo pricing, are we really in an ideal spot where, you could decide if you want Cooper Kupp all the way up in the superstar spot? A lot of people obviously are going to have him there, but regardless of what you decide to do with that, is this a pricing format for you where you're not just comfortable, but you're almost going out of your way to put both QBs in there and then build around that?
Yeah, it's gonna be tight, but the $30 for Stafford makes it definitely possible. So if you play Cup, Burrow, Stafford, and not to jump ahead to wide receiver, but it's kind of important to talk about the context of the three players expected to put up the most fantasy points in this game, being Cup, Burrow, Stafford. You basically have $15 left, and it's not that cost prohibitive. You can't play Beckham at 23, but you'd be able to play the likes of if Higbee plays or Uzoma plays. I don't really know how effective either one of them would be here, but you could for sure play up Blanton. There's Jefferson. You could get different with a P. Ryan, who we saw bust off a big run. But with Cam Akers at $19, it really throws a wrench into this entire slate, because if he gets the entire backfield, you're basically going to be selecting which $11 or $10 player can be serviceable with that ensemble. You could go Cup, Stafford, Akers, Burrow, find some kind of a guy from Cincinnati there, or you just play the pass catchers. I think the salary construct with Burrow, because we project Stafford higher, but with Burrow $3 more expensive, I think it becomes more of a contrarian play to put into lineups. So if you want to be having some fun, put him up in the superstar, play the likes of, we know who it's going to be. It's going to be Chase and Higgins more than likely. That really helps him achieve a superstar-like performance where he's going to put up the gaudy numbers. And, I think in the event that both of them cannibalize like the absolute ceiling games we've seen from Chase and Higgins over the course of the last few weeks, you're looking at a spot where, Matthew Stafford can still fit into some of those lineups.
Let's go to the running back position then. I'm sure we'll circle back at points. If anyone has any questions, thoughts, get them out here in the Awesemo YouTube page, Twitter, wherever you're finding us. Obviously, hit the like, hit the subscribe button, turn on those notifications for other great shows that are coming your way. We greatly appreciate it. Running backs here, really, it's Joe Mixon certainly is our priority on the Cincy side. And like you said, it gets a little complicated to some degree anyway for LA. But first for Mixon, he's projected for about 14.5 points. He's $31, so by no means is he cheap. Thing is, though, all due respect to Samaje Perine, he's going to get the lion's share of the load of all the running backs in this game in all likelihood, regardless of which side of the ball you're looking at or which team. At least 20 touches in 5 straight games. That includes 29 in 29 targets, 26 catches. So obviously he's a guy that's incredibly versatile. It's not just the run game. In fact, it becomes to some degree in this game, I would think, more about the passing game when you look at what he has done or not done, if you will, as of late. 88 rushing yards in the AFC Championship game. First time over 80 since late November, since just after Thanksgiving. So do you expect Mixon to be not a non-factor per se on the ground, but just that much more impactful in the air to the point where that is what you're actually rostering him for, if you're rostering him?
Well, yeah. I mean, the thing with Mixon is that you get Joe Burrow just playing at such a high level. Of course, they're going to be inclined to just feed the hot hand there. And Joe Mixon, I mean, that was the first time over 20 carries in a while too, I believe. I mean, we had looked at, you talked about since late November. Last time he had over 20 carries was November 28th. So we're talking, pretty 9 games, 10 games almost. It's been since he had over that amount. And given they were behind it a lot of that game, but they still kind of stuck to their guns and still, it wasn't a crazy efficient, just over 4 yards per carry, but like that's good enough to be able to open it up for the likes of this passing game. So I think he's just fine to be firing up. I will say, I've kind of changed my tune over the course of the last week. I think Samaje Perine is maybe a little bit more viable than what people think before. It had been a while since we had seen him get to 25% of the snaps. Since week 15 here, he played 14, I guess 29, but that was a game against Kansas City at the end of the season that, obviously Kansas City wasn't full bore there. We had the Vegas Raiders game, 21%, 22%, 25%. If they are playing from behind mode, and Joe Mixon, they've been playing ahead and he's been getting some passing volume, that's going to happen when he's playing 75% of the snaps. But I didn't really factor it in enough that he's going to be playing 25% of the snaps. Perine, that is. He can definitely be a serviceable change of pace back, more of the pass catcher, more of the guy that we kind of know as that type of dude, not any kind of a guy who's going to take away from the carries or the volume in that department. Hasn't gotten a carry since his one that he got against the Raiders, but I think at 25% of the snaps, he's actually more viable. If you have anything happen whatsoever to Mixon, you obviously have the entire workload, the entire backfield. And knowing that those are the only 2 guys who are really going to be on the field, period, Evans isn't going to get mixed in the Super Bowl. Perine is actually somebody that I'm willing to be rostering, especially at his $11 tag on Yahoo.
Mm-hmm. No carries his last 2 games. You mentioned he's cheap, $11, but he has obviously gotten some work in the air, including that long touchdown.
43-yard touchdown. Laffy literally came on and said, oh, the only way P. Ryan gets there is like a 40-yard touchdown catch randomly when he gets mixed in, and bang, it happened. Sure, it was beautiful. It was beautiful.
4 catches the last couple games with that long touchdown, obviously. And he could be, again, however you think this game is going to play out. Should the Rams jump ahead early, or rather the Bengals jump ahead early and the Rams are the ones playing from behind, and since he actually hangs on for a while, that's, when you potentially see Mixon, P. Ryan, both get a fair amount of work, and you've got that whole backfield covered. It becomes a lot more complicated, obviously, on the Rams side of things. You look at Cam Akers is the projected horse, if you will. He's, dozen points, $19. Fumbled twice in the divisional round. He didn't practice all last week after getting banged up in the NFC Championship game. His carries or his touches have been 9, 27, 14 here in the playoffs. So obviously very inconsistent at points. He has certainly been outplayed by Sony Michel. In our projections, like Michel, he's $5 cheaper. He's $14. He's projected for only 3.5 points. Then you have Darrell Henderson, who, if he is active, is projected for 3 points. He's $13. Does this just become an entirely, fade them all situation? Are you looking to get a little cheaper and hope that you've got some differentiation on the part of Sony Michel? Can you justify Cam Akers? How are you analyzing this LA backfield? You're muted.
Dang it. That's the first time that's happened. Oh, my gosh.
I wasn't looking off at the other screen where I actually had your face. I was like, is this just me? Did we lose him? Is he gone?
No, it's just me talking into the abyss. I'm trying out these headphones. I've been trying these out the last couple days to mix it up, just because then I don't have a cord in my way. It's not connected to the thing, but that's the first time that happened. It was bound to happen, no doubt about it. But this is the spot. If you could just tell me flat out which one of them gets the majority of the workload, you'd roster them in bulk. But I think it's far more variant than what people have been projecting. And that's why you're seeing Cam Akers, especially on Yahoo right now. I mean, like projection underneath 8. He's been a guy that has been projected well north of that here. But no doubt about it, Sony Michel played 57% of the offensive snaps. And I don't think that got enough attention. Yeah, there was a spot where Cam Akers got a little dinged up, but like Sony Michel got the majority of the workload, and we're just projecting everybody to be clicking on Cam Akers' name. That's a little surprising to me, especially when you go through the box score. Do you know how many fumbles Sony Michel has had this season?
6.
1. He's had 1. Week 4, he had 1.
It had to be one extreme or the other.
Yeah, it was this extreme. He had 1, and we're talking about a guy who can secure. That's a weird way of putting that. He's very secure with the football is what I want to say. And sure. Cam Akers coming off of 2 fumbles. They're like, hey man, it's okay. We got you. We got your back. They won a game that Tom Brady almost pulled a real Tom Brady thing at the end of that one to close out his career. But I think that there is so much variance here, and Darrell Henderson isn't as big of a wrinkle. I don't think. He might get a carry or 2. Maybe if they get way up in a game, maybe he comes in for like a ceremonial, hey, we're proud of you, welcome back kind of a thing. He's basically going to be a security blanket for those 2 guys who have been in this game constantly. Now, Sony Michel is definitely going to be my priority because I expect him to be a fraction of the rostership over on Yahoo. It looks to be definitely the case over on DK, where we have everything a little bit more fine-tuned here at the moment. But I'm looking at Yahoo where, it's a different puzzle with a $19 Cam Akers. There's no doubt he's going to be crazy popular at that number. I think I'm going to just, on a lot of builds, just leave that $5 on the table, go to Sony Michel. There are a lot of paths where at a reduced ownership that he can definitely pay off for you.
I mentioned as we're sitting about halfway home here on this show, give us a like, hit the subscribe button if you're watching along on the Awesemo YouTube page. You can keep up with all of our great shows and NFL and other sports for that matter, DFS offers that are available to you, giveaways, so much more once you subscribe. Of course, hit the notification button so you can be alerted when any of our great shows come your way, regardless of what sport they are covering. And we're not going anywhere once football's done. It just means we're moving on, focusing on that much more NBA and NHL and golf and, UFC and whatever it might be, obviously NASCAR and all of it. So make sure too, we've got a fun Super Bowl giveaway going on. It's pinned on our Awesemo_com Twitter handle. Reply whether you think Joe Burrow or Matt Stafford will have more passing yards. Follow the instructions on the graphic to be entered for a chance to win a year of Awesemo Plus Platinum, a $1,000 value. This will be one of our biggest giveaways all year, so make sure you enter this one. Who do you think it's going to be, Burrow or Stafford?
Oh my God. What's even the question? I wasn't listening.
More passing yards in this game, Burrow or Stafford?
I'll go Stafford because I think that it's a pretty secure fact that he's going to be effective. Burrow is very highly variant, but again, I'm not betting it because I just don't have a great read on how effective. Because again, the Rams secondary is not very good. Like they're just not. And there's 3 very capable wide receivers here. There's situations where Burrow could get sacked 10 times or 0. Like legitimately, there are so many spots that I could see this game playing out. So I'll go with Stafford.
And just hear Aaron Donald out there. 0 sacks. Challenge accepted.
Just saying. Get the ball out of your hands fast, Burrow. Here.
It's all about Cooper Kupp. It's always all about Cooper Kupp. The NFL's Offensive Player of the Year, as honored at NFL Honors last night. Projected for about 22 points. High guy on this single game slate here. $41, so he's also the most expensive. Then you obviously get to everybody else. It really is Cooper Kupp or everybody else. Let's start with Cooper Kupp in particular here, who 4 touchdowns in the playoffs at this point, averaging nearly 130 yards per game since January 1st. So over the last few there, and he's gone for 24 plus Yahoo points 8 times so far this season. So we know he's capable of exploding. We've seen it week after week. What are your expectations for him? Is he just too good that you have to roster him?
He has 20 touchdowns in 20 games. He's got 2,333 yards. He's got 170 catches. He's averaging north of 25 fantasy points on most spots. I mean, we're looking at 22 that he's averaging on Yahoo right now. Obviously, half-point PPR makes it a little bit more viable, where in the event that Odell Beckham or Van Jefferson really come along for the ride, have a big play, and you end up firing up a little bit of Matt Stafford in the superstar spot, you could be passing a lot of the field. But our tools just amplify how good of a play Cooper Kupp is. And we're looking at a top score percentage on Yahoo of 36.6%. And he's a wide receiver. He's not a running back. He's not a quarterback. He's a wide receiver. That's ridiculous to be that secure with your volume to over a third of the time. Nearly 40% of the time you play out this game, have him be the top scorer on half-point PPR sites. That's absurd. You should be rostering him. $41 is not that prohibitive at all. You play Cooper Kupp. You click on Matt Stafford, who for some reason is cheaper than Joe Burrow. Makes it pretty easy to click on one of the pass catchers or Joe Mixon from Cincinnati, be able to play a pretty well-balanced lineup and really have all the upside of the entire game. He's unavoidable chalk. If you're making one lineup, there's always a case to be made. I mean, there's going to be 40% of the time he doesn't pan out, but even still, 36.6% of the time he's going to be the top scorer. And then 45.1% of the time, he's going to finish 2nd to 5th in scoring here, which means that over 90% of the time, he's going to be an optimal play. Best of luck fading him in that one lineup. Even if I'm playing 20, I bet he appears on every single team on Yahoo. It's not enough. There's not enough of an opportunity cost at his price. It's just an automatic play for me.
So we mentioned, much earlier what you're capable of doing with the Yahoo pricing right now, and that is, you could put Kupp in there. You could put the 2 QBs in there. One of them's in the superstar spot. Maybe you want to pay up and put Kupp there, or however you want to obviously shake it out. You can have all 3 of those guys. The thing is, it does become a situation where you got to fade somebody good, whether that's Joe Mixon, whether it's one of these other wideouts. And in particular, obviously, that brings me to Jamar Chase, who is just a guy that you have to fade someone. Is he the guy that you have to fade?
It's interesting because I've been fading him throughout the first 3 rounds of the playoffs, and it's gone so well. Just like full fading a guy that even on a 2-game set, I would say I probably made a mistake last week or 2 weeks ago it was now by fading him. Just somebody who has explosive big playability, but I don't think it can be emphasized enough how good T. Higgins is. And when T. Higgins gets involved in spots, I mean, we've seen 13.1 and 13.3. They just cannibalize each other's production because they're basically 2 alpha wide receivers on the same team. Whereas Cooper Kupp as good as Odell Beckham can be, Cooper Kupp's just in a different stratosphere. So I think prioritizing Kupp and then Chase maybe takes a little bit of a backseat as a result. I'm also pretty surprised by how different he projects out as a top play. So only a $7 difference between him and Cooper Kupp. He's $1 more expensive than Burrow, and he's $4 more expensive than Stafford. But his top score percentage is only 8.2%. 2 to 5% is going to be 38.6%. That's less than half the time he's appearing in the optimal Yahoo lineup, either in the superstar spot as a top scorer or in the utility. I find that to be pretty surprising for a guy in a single game that has shown as much upside as what he has. I think he might be a guy that I overinvest in the superstar spot, because if he has one of those games, like one of those eruption games, it feels like something that could really put you over the edge where you're avoiding a lot of duplication. But in terms of like making him fit in lineups with Kupp, lineups with Stafford, I think you're going to be running into a lot of the same builds just because they're so expensive. And Jamar Chase is $34. I'm probably going to be light on him for the fourth straight week in the utility and kind of figuring it out from there.
I guess I just wonder if you're really high on believing the Bengals are going to win this game, if you just feel
I'm not
right. But if you're someone who did, obviously, it's going to impact in a likelihood, unless you're just studying the numbers and ignoring the narratives and your own opinions. If you firmly believe that the Bengals are going to win this game, how can you not look at a stack that includes, obviously, Burrow? Maybe he's in the superstar spot. Chase and Higgins, like you said, and just, sprinkling in a little bit of Rams on the other side.
Yeah, this is such a condensed offense. I mean, especially if Uzomah is going to be limited. I mean, he participated in practice yesterday. That's a great sign that we had from him, whereas Higbee didn't. And that's going to be what we get to at the tight end position. But it is so condensed. We know it's going to be primarily mix-in. I mean, I talked about P. Ryan just as a guy that I think you can mix in, not a priority, but I would say that I'm going to probably be above the field on a guy like that because I'm playing 20, 50, 150 lineups in these spots, whereas most people are just building a couple handfuls. And maybe P. Ryan isn't as deep as we need to go there, but we know it's going to be mix-in. We know it's going to be Chase Higgins and then Boyd getting mixed in. There's really no wide receiver for it. There's no Ben Skoranek. There's really not even a crazy amount of volume that we've seen for CJ Uzomah until the playoffs. I mean, he had one real high upside game. What week was that? I got to go back to I don't know what it was. It was October 24th against Baltimore, out of the middle of nowhere, put up a massive, massive score. But until the playoffs, he's a guy that I've just been off of. By necessity, you have to find some value, and he's been a piece of some of those lineups here in recent weeks. But like, if he's going to be limited, it becomes even more condensed. I think it's pretty safe to say, if you think Cincinnati goes out and is effective in this game, they don't even have to win. Come from behind mode for Joe Burrow can be very profitable. Obviously they did come from behind and win that Kansas City game, but they were down a couple scores early, and it just becomes airing it out to Chase, airing it out to Higgins. And it could be a really fun build to go superstar any one of the wide receivers, including Boyd, if you wanted to get super different and avoid everybody. There's no doubt that every single one of them carries massive upside because Burrow is that good.
I know Higgins obviously finished the season strong, and he's had his moments here in the playoffs as well. But do you worry that he's kind of boom or bust?
Yes, but it's also a one-game sample, and if he booms, you kind of need him. And if you're going to say it's a coin flip,
true of anybody.
Yeah, but I'm saying if it's a coin flip, I'd say it's more of a coin flip for a Higgins, where he can put up a score that can actually be very serviceable for you, as opposed to, Van Jefferson. And we have to also remember, we can't just talk about their likelihood of booming in a spot like this. We just need them to be optimal. Like Showdown really comes down to getting the right pieces, finding the right ensemble, and being able to just kind of find that magic mixture of who it is. If Cooper Kupp puts up 40, you're going to need him in the superstar spot at any cost. Like, it doesn't matter if the guy at $10 only gets you 2. If that's going to be the build, then the only way to get like the 4 players that really fit in that lineup, that 5th player is really ancillary and doesn't matter nearly as much. And it could be a number of people. Same thing can be said about a guy like Higgins. So the difference between playing a guy like Higgins in the flex and just avoiding Chase is that one's going to be more popular than the other. Same thing can be said about a guy like Van Jefferson. His chances of booming are far, far lower than a guy like T. Higgins or Odell Beckham in these like mid wide receiver spots. but so is the rostership. It's so much lower. So you get paid so many more times when he does go off, when he does fit into the build. So it's avoiding duplication to a certain extent, but it's really just kind of finding ways to deviate from the field so that when you are right, you get paid for it rather than just holding hands with, 80 other people.
So Cooper Kupp, $41, 34 for Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, 24, which brings us to Odell Beckham Jr., the fourth highest price guy in terms of the receivers anyway, at $23. He is projected for about a dozen points on our Awesemo projections. Again, check out the Awesemo Plus Platinum subscription. You can see all the same stuff that we're citing to you here. And, he's come on of late. Really, he's been good since he got to LA in large part. 5 touchdowns, 7 times he's been targeted in the red zone. So certainly he is a red zone target in general. 7+ targets, 3 out of his last 5 games, went 9 of 11 for 113 against San Fran last time out. He's averaging about 12.5 yards per catch on 19 receptions here in the playoffs so far. So getting hot at the right time, I think really, again, narrative street, but if ever there were a guy who's just trying to, I guess Matt Stafford, his teammate, is, this is kind of true of him too, but in a very different way. If ever there were someone just trying to change the world's perception of him, and, I don't think people looked at Matt Stafford as, he can't, he's a loser, he can't do it. It was, just you didn't have enough around you in Detroit and they never got over the hump and blah, 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 blah. Playoff failure, regular season, decent.
Yeah, Calvin Johnson sucked.
Yeah, but like Odell Beckham Jr., is viewed as this team killer and,
right,
doesn't get along with his quarterbacks. And he's like, this is a guy like sort of the way, for so long we talked about like Carmelo Anthony in the NBA. Like this guy's never going to win. So obviously an opportunity out there to do it, to get it done, to change the narrative, to get people to shut up. How motivated is he by that? Obviously, you heard him screaming post-game after clinching a spot in the Super Bowl. And what's he capable of doing here?
I mean, he's capable of a lot because his offense, he doesn't have to be the number one, which I think is very effective for him as well. In Cleveland with Jarvis Landry there, Jarvis Landry, more of the possession receiver. Baker Mayfield, I think, was a little bit more comfortable making him the priority in a lot of those schematics. And, now you're in a completely different situation. Matt Stafford has been excellent by any metric you look at. Sure, he's had some turnover problems here and there, but he's been exceptional. And I think Odell Beckham, how could you not like being in this situation? Your defense is the best in the league on one side. Offensively, you can kind of fit into the mold. You don't have to be the absolute alpha. You don't have to prove anything. Your team can do a lot of the work for you. I think that's really going to make anybody happy. So I've never been a gigantic Odell Beckham fan. I don't think anybody who's watched those Wednesday shows that I've done with Matt Gajewski and all the back and forth we've had about him. But like, obviously, as soon as he got acquired by the Rams, I changed my tune because he's a very good wide receiver. I don't think I've ever argued that, but in Cleveland, just a different situation. With the Rams, completely different situation. He is set up to succeed. There's no doubt about it. I think the most important part of Showdown on Yahoo comes down to T. Higgins at $24 and Odell Beckham at $23. If you build out with 2 or 3 of these guys that are more expensive with them, you really only play one of them. And I don't really see a spot, as much as I love T. Higgins and I'm in love with the guy, I've always have been. I think he's a physical freak. I think he's very, very underrated as a wide receiver. I think he started to show what he's capable of this entire season and people have really come on to him, but Odell Beckham is the priority for me. I think it's going to be easier to play him with a $30 Stafford and a $41 Kupp. And that's definitely the priority duo in just about any lineup for me. It's going to be a lot easier for me to click on Odell Beckham and then even maybe package it with Higgins and then go a little bit cheaper there, as opposed to prioritizing Burrow, Chase, Mixon. I think those 3 guys are really going to be more of the fade for me. So Odell Beckham, absolute priority for me. We've just seen him come on too strong here at the end of this season, and just seeing more and more volume as he's getting acclimated to the offense. I mean, it was a late acquisition here for them, and he's been excellent, no doubt about it. I don't think anybody's going to argue that he's a good wide receiver. It's just a question of, can he keep this going against Cincinnati secondary? I think he does.
Van Jefferson, $13. He's in our optimal lineup in large part, obviously, because of his salary. But how do you feel about his potential here?
God. So I think this is a stat I brought up on a lot of these. Over the course of the regular season, the Rams played 11 personnel with 3 wide receivers on the field 83% of the time. That's the highest rate in the league. Number 2 is Cincinnati, by the way. That's pretty fun to think about, where both of these teams are pretty much all oriented around one tight end, have your 3 wide receivers out there, and let's air out the football. Van Jefferson has been on the field 90% of the time plus in all of these games in the postseason, and he just hasn't gotten it there. I mean, Ben Skoranek got the best look out of any, ancillary wide receiver there from the Rams, and just let the ball hit his hands and dropped it. I wish that was Van Jefferson catching that one. It would have been a much, much more enjoyable weekend 2 weeks ago. But I'm looking right now at Van Jefferson as a guy that I also want to prioritize. He's $13. That exact lineup I talk about, where you play Beckham and Higgins, my main lineup that I'm going to be playing, I might just avoid playing quarterbacks and really kind of gear it towards some of these pass catchers. And there's a really clear path to being able to still play Kupp in a superstar, or be able to play a running back in a superstar if you wanted to take that narrative, which I don't. But I'm looking at Van Jefferson at $13 is probably my favorite piece of value, period. And I don't think it's remotely close.
Let's look at the tight ends. If anyone has any questions, get them in. We're here with you for about, 10 or so more minutes. CJ Uzoma, who, as you mentioned, we just don't know. I mean, he could, theoretically and in all likelihood even be limited. There were obviously the initial fears he wasn't even going to play in this game. Mm-hmm. So he's not going to be anywhere near full strength. Projected for about 7 points. He's $16. Kendall Blanton becomes very interesting, obviously, for LA on the other side at about 5 projected points. Obviously, this is with Tyler Higbee ruled out, not a factor in our projections right now. Blanton about 5 projected points. He's $14. Higbee, if he does play, pardon me, he is bare minimum. But for Blanton, 7 for 7, a touchdown his last couple of games. Bengals, as we know, absolutely horrible against the tight end position. What direction are you going here with respect to the tight ends? Are you going to roster any of them?
Oh man, it is so gross. So Uzoma, he could play here and suit up. I think Higbee is the guy that I do not expect to play, like, almost at all. Like, I still think Blanton, $14. He's the identical number as Sony Michel. That'll be a decision point. Van Jefferson at 13 is my priority out of all of them, even though Sony Michel, I'll be over invested to the field. Shouldn't be that hard to do once the projections kind of get set up and we have a ton of rostership to really kind of take from Yahoo. But I'm looking at a guy like True Sample as a guy down at the very, very bottom. I think you at least have to talk about it, where if you're going to get a completely limited situation here where he's just going to be out, like CJ Uzoma maybe plays 25%, 30% of the snaps. I find it so unlikely with both of their injuries that they immediately undertake the entire thing. I think a $10 Drew Sample has to be on the table now, as opposed to guys like Chris Evans or maybe some of these other pieces. He's going to be more popular as a $10 selection. Maybe that gets me away from kind of going towards those builds, because it is such a low floor kind of play. Even if he's on the field, he's known more as a pass blocker here, but at least he's seen some targets here, 2 in 2 of the last 3 weeks. I think there's at least something to be said for that. So I might just make him a guy that is just completely dictated on whether or not people think that CJ Uzoma is going to be effective or not. I just don't see him or Higbee being effective whatsoever. So I think I'll try to take some shots there. But if the field really starts rostering Drew Sample, 0% chance you should do it.
So low percentage of your builds is what you're saying.
Yeah. Out of 150, like, we're talking single digits.
Are you more inclined to, and just for anyone joining us late, we've touched on some of this, but are you rostering multiple wide receivers, running backs, just in terms of like the bigger picture? Obviously, if you're looking to load up in a relative sense, you don't have that many spots to play with, but if you're looking to, stack at a certain position versus another, which way are you going?
Stacking the pass catchers here. I mean, it's just got to be wide receiver heavy. I think there's got to be 2 of the offenses that just like to air it out more than any other teams in the league that are facing each other in the same game. And people are talking about the defenses as well. Well, we don't have to worry about kickers over on Yahoo. That's a nice feeling, but defenses are definitely listed. And I think they might get a lot of attention here at $13 for Cincinnati, $17 for the Rams. We've seen both of them, put up some really, really serviceable games here this entire season, where they can put up double digits and be optimal paths for guys that, if they outperform Tyler Boyd, would you be surprised? No, I wouldn't here in this spot, but I think in terms, if I had to pick one position, it's got to be the chalk, taking just all the pass catchers and going from there. What would be tough for me is seeing something like Mixon, like we saw last week, where we had working out optimal Mixon and P. Ryan together. I think the same thing can be said. I find it very unlikely that we're going to get Akers and Michelle to work out in like an optimal sense. So I think, if I'm double stacking anything, it's just got to be pass catchers throughout the entire lineup.
Bengals DST, you alluded to them, 8 sacks, 6 turnovers last 3 games. You have Matt Stafford on the other side, who was picked off 17 times this year. Just for differentiation's sake, can you make the case?
Totally. And you just need one play. And that's really what it is that you get the opportunity, either one of them get a pick 6, and hard to believe that at $17 or below, you look at all these options. Tyler Boyd should garner the most attention at $17. I've talked about Sonny Michel, Van Jefferson. I really like his value, but at that range, $17, you get the Rams defense, especially if you're playing Kupp, if you're playing Akers, if you're playing Stafford, if you're playing Odell, those kind of guys in the lineup. It's pretty easy to click on the Rams. And in a game that they just dominate, really hard for me not to see the Rams defense working out optimally, especially, it's been talked about 9 sacks you saw in the divisional round for Joe Burrow. I mean, he's just somebody who's been under duress constantly throughout the entire season, and he still stayed in the pocket and been effective in a lot of these games coming down the stretch. But that's a lot of sacks, and that's a pretty guaranteed floor you're getting with the Rams defense. And then the Cincinnati side, we talked about it, Stafford, the most turnover-prone quarterback at the end of this season, $13. There's really nobody. I mean, I literally said Drew Sample. Like, that is as disgusting as it should get. So, like, you have Samaje P. Ryan, who's just a contrarian build. Most of those builds where I'm landing on those guys, I'm going to want to have be near zeroed out, because Cincinnati definitely has the ability to have a couple of things go their way. They've done it before. They've been getting pressure here. 8 sacks in their last 3 weeks. Don't want to be sleeping on them, as you said. So $13. The defense is very, very viable over on Yahoo.
All right. Who's going to win this game? Give me a score just for funsies.
31-28, 31-27, something, one of those two. I'm kind of covering both of them. I've said
close
both
and higher scoring.
numbers.
Okay.
So higher scoring, I do like the over, but I'm not going to be putting any kind of substantial money on it, because I think that there's definitely a path to blowouts on both ends of this, which is just so weird to say. And again, maybe that whenever I say something like that, that just tells me bet the dogs. That's what happened in the divisional round. But I think that the Rams win a close one. Maybe Cincinnati covers there, but I'll go the Rams side. How about you?
So I'm not putting money on this game. If I were going to, it's a whole head versus heart thing. If I were going to actually invest money in the outcome of this game, I would bet the Rams. I do believe, obviously, they're the better team. They're the team that people have been talking about ever since Stafford got there, long before the acquisitions of guys like Beckham and Von Miller and some of the other impactful guys that obviously they've had, never mind who they've already had, like Cooper Kupp and Aaron Donald. That being said, I feel like I'm into the Cinderella story, man. And I feel like I'm willing this to happen for Cincinnati. I want this. And so I'm surprised that I'm going under ever so slightly on the points, because I feel like it's going to be the kind of game that again, I don't know. Like somebody asked me the other day, who's going to win the game? What's the score? The words out of my mouth were Bengals 27-21.
Ooh.
Which it feels weird. It feels weird to say Cincinnati's going to win. It feels weird to say that neither team is going to get into the 30s. That being said, once it's come out of my mouth, I hate to reverse course on it. So I'm just going to go with it.
Say it with your chest, Adam Kaufman. Say it with your chest.
Puff it out.
Come on now. 27-21.
Yeah, exactly.
Bengals roll that's all I'm hearing from you.
Yeah. Yeah, Jamar Chase, he's going for 200 yards, multiple touchdowns, Burrow's MVP. It's going to be incredible. Coming up.
You know what I was just thinking about? Hold up. As we're closing this out. I was thinking about this yesterday. What if I just listed off like 15 different takes of the Super Bowl at the end of a show, and then we just clip the one that's actually the closest to correct?
And put that out on,
put that out on social and
Twitter
just be
after the fact.
Absolute liar about it.
Look at how smart our guys are. Here, we'll do a practice one. Okay. Eric, who's going to win this game?
21-17 Bengals.
Eric, who's going to win this game?
35-27 Rams.
Who's the MVP?
Aaron Donald.
In no universe.
No.
As a defensive player, ever won Super Bowl MVP maybe like one time?
Yeah, it's twice. Wasn't there Patriots cornerback that won at one time? No. Am I
No.
thinking about this incorrectly? No,
No,
absolutely not. Cool.
typically it's Tom Brady when it's a Patriot.
Okay. I was just thinking Malcolm Butler maybe one time.
No, although I mean, if ever there were a time that you could have justified it, for sure.
Malcolm Butler,
NHL
baby.
strategy show for a light little 4-game slate tonight is on the way in about 5 minutes. You'll have Cliffy and Harris, Aton and Terry coming your way at 4:30 Eastern for the Prize Picks live NFL show, NBA Deeper Dive, 5 to 6. Decent slate tonight, 7 games, I believe, on the hardwood.
Yes,
Lockie
sir.
and Adam, you will be back with Greg for it will be NBA Live Before Lock from 6 to 7:30. So you'll be getting all sorts of well-versed in that. Should be fun.
It's going to be a blast. And I'm sure we'll talk some hockey. I'm sure we'll talk some NBA here, Adam. Have a great weekend. Best of luck in the Super Bowl, my dude.
Should be a good time. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Thanks to Mike Awesemo for keeping us in check. And, of course, always good being here with Lindquist. I guess for the last time on a Friday, at least talking football. Maybe they'll have us together talking basketball next time around. We'll see you. Thanks, everyone.
Harry.